Good morning, Colorado. You are listening to the Daily Sun Up. It's a conversation with the Colorado Sun. I'm team editor David Krause. Before we jump into today's conversation, here is a quick message from our sponsor.
Support comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a seamless mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Credit Union of Colorado. Honestly good. Learn more at honestlygood.org. Got leftover paint taking up space? Recycle it with Paint Care. Paint Care makes it simple and easy for households and businesses to recycle their leftover paint responsibly. Drop it off for free at one of more than 200 sites across Colorado. To learn more, visit paintcare.org. If your air conditioner never seems to stop running, old windows could be the reason. Upgrade now during Window Nation's Buy 4, Get 4 free sale. Replace your windows and get half free. Plus, no money down and no interest for 2 years. Don't wait. Save big today. Visit windownation.com. Proud partner of Wounded Warrior Project.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome, listeners, to our ongoing series of Friday Conversations with Colorado authors. I'm Kevin Simpson, editor of our Sunlit feature, and today we're joined by John Andrews, the author of An American Nurse in Paris, which is part of his historical fiction works built around a pivotal battle during World War I. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So let's get right to the novel, An American Nurse in Paris. This looks at the war from really an interesting point of view that leads to a great narrative. So set this one up for our listeners. What's it about?
The American Nurse in Paris is about a young American woman, a journalist who coincidentally also has her RN, who went to Paris on her own dime, paid her way to Paris to report on the war. Her interest was particularly to focus on the medical side of the war, something she knew she could do in a unique way, because none of the male journalists could probably have spelled streptococcus without a dictionary. Once she arrived, she is shut down and basically kept in Paris, relegated to reporting on uninteresting matrons of wealthy families talking about fashion. The American press at that time was incredibly misogynistic, and my character, Alice Simmons, beats her head against that wall until she clearly will go nowhere. An event happens that would be a spoiler for me to reveal, but an event happens that seals her fate as a reporter, leaving only two options: leave the country or use her nursing degree. The rest of the book looks at her struggle to begin nursing, since she didn't bring any of her paperwork, any of her certificates with her. And she manages to get a job as a nurse's aide first in a Paris hospital. By the end of the book, is fully certified as a nurse. So it shows the struggle of a young journalist who happens to be female, running into the double wall of the American Press Corps and the U.S. Army, a nurse without her credentials along, trying to get a job, ending up working as a nursing aide, which was another story in itself, and finally breaking into the nursing staff at the American Red Cross Military Hospital No. 1 in the Paris vicinity.
Well, so tell us a little about how you created this character, Alice Simmons, who readers can get to know, by the way, in the excerpt from the book coming up starting Sunday at coloradosun.com. But was she inspired by a real-life figure, or was she a product of your imagination, a literary creation?
She was, first off, a literary creation. She was created as a character in another series of novels that I plan to publish eventually. So she was created before I even conceived of writing this series or planting her as a nurse in a Paris hospital. She is really a compilation of many people who I've worked with over many nurses as well as women physicians. My work before writing was as a physician, so I've worked with a lot of nurses over the years. Alice is really kind of a conglomeration of all of those, not one of them.
As we mentioned earlier, An American Nurse in Paris revolved around that famous battle of Belleau Wood, which was actually, I guess, a series of battles that took place about 40 miles outside of Paris in the summer of 1918. What drew you to that period of history in particular?
When my oldest son joined the Marine Corps in 2003, I realized that my knowledge of the Marine Corps was pretty limited. I had not served in the military myself. I began a deep dive into Marine Corps history, lore, mythology, ethos. As I did that, I also realized how little I knew about World War I, and particularly the role of the Marine Corps in World War I. That drew me deeper into the World War I history of the Marine Corps, and then it became obvious that Battle of Belleau Wood was a very key piece of that. Some Marine Corps historians have said that this was the birthplace of the modern Marine Corps. Others dispute that characterization. I would say, though, that it was probably the crucible in which the modern Marine Corps was formed. Before that battle, the Marines had fought small engagements off ships. The biggest engagement they had was Battle of Veracruz in Mexico, I think in 1918. But before that, it was a company here, a platoon there. After Belleau Wood, they deployed in brigade and then later division-sized formations and fought in a very different way than they did previously. So this was kind of a fulcrum or crucible.
And there were tremendous casualties on both sides, as I understand, right? This was really a very difficult campaign.
That's correct. Some people talk about decimating forces, which is killing 1 out of every 10, killing or disabling 1 out of every 10 warriors. That's what happens when you decimate an enemy. This was a battle in which the casualties, deaths and wounded, probably exceeded 70 or 80% on both sides. They just kept bringing in replacements and replacements and replacements. This was far more than decimation. It was a bloody, tough, hard-fought battle with high casualties on both sides. It was a real knockdown, drag-out fight. And what it did was convince the Americans and the French that they could move forward and win this war. And it convinced the Germans that they were up against somebody they did not understand. They had assumed that the United States was as mediocre as it was in 1917, when it was rated the 19th best military in the world after Portugal. This battle showed the Germans they're up against somebody totally different than they thought they would be.
So I can see how, as you mentioned in your Q&A that runs on Sunday, that the story originally grew to 800 pages. There was a lot to say. But you found an interesting solution to sort of turn that sweeping story into more manageable portions. So tell us a little bit about how that happened and how you wound up dividing the story the way you did.
Well, I originally wrote this huge novel, a Ken Follett-sized novel. It was called Belleau, and it comprised both the story Our Desperate Hour and An American Nurse in Paris. So it was originally one book. When I realized how big it was getting and how impractical it was to consider publishing this, I split out the Paris side of the story. And it was actually really fairly easy to split it out because it was a story with 2 parts. I just split the parts into 2. So it was really not that hard to split it up.
And so you had a second novel then from that.
That's correct. Basically, the way that I look at these two novels is two sides of a coin. One side of the coin is An American Nurse in Paris. That tells the story of the young woman, but it also tells the story of men wounded in the Belleau Wood battle. Their the medical side, as well as the psychological and, if you will, the spiritual side of being wounded, being a casualty, being in the hospital, the trauma of it, the post-traumatic stress effects of it. So PTSD runs through all my novels. Our Desperate Hour takes you into the battle. The central story in it is really a father and son story, a father seeking his son in the midst of the battle. But Our Desperate Hour really is inside the battle. The only female characters are a cameo by Alice Simmons and one other woman. Otherwise, let's say that Our Desperate Hour is a war book. It's a battle book. You could consider it a guy book, except that a lot of women who have read it really like it too. And I think that that's because of the central father-son story. Then An American Nurse in Paris is the other side of the coin. They occur simultaneously with overlapping storylines, overlapping characters. They can be read in any order. There's no order.
And then there was a third element too here that you explored, right?
Yeah, I was getting a little tired of battle and war and suffering in the military sense. And I'd always wanted to write a dog book since I read The Art of Racing in the Rain, which is like my favorite dog book. So having read that book, and at the same time, we welcomed a border collie into our house, and she was teaching me a lot about border collies, which are a very unique breed.
Yes.
I thought it would be fun to write a dog novel and to use my dog as the model for the central characters. So you could look at Dogs Don't Cry as a novel that is a dog novel wrapped inside a coming-of-age story about two teenage orphaned French refugees from the Battle of Belleau Wood. So these kids were fleeing the battle. They went through the organizing American zone, ultimately to Paris, where they meet up with Alice Simmons and some other characters that overlap in these novels. My goal was to create a young adult compatible novel that tells the story of the French civilians, something that no other American novel has done, French civilians in that war. So I was trying to entertain myself, lighten it up a little bit. A third of the book is told from the dog's point of view. So, and she's a kind of a sarcastic narrator. She's pretty funny, actually.
So, which leads to another question here. Once you decided to break off the characters from the original huge manuscript and then add this third element as well, did the shifting points of view require some rethinking and revision? That's always interesting because I know often authors write from multiple points of view, and it's a particular challenge.
It is. And Dogs Don't Cry was actually the breakout or the breakthrough novel in this series for me from a point of view standpoint. I wrote that entire novel from a first-person present tense point of view, which I had not ever done before. It was an experiment, and I like the results. So I went back and rewrote the other two novels in a first-person present tense point of view. This point of view is I think it gives the story, the narrative, more immediacy than past tense or third person. So I'd written first two with third person past tense. I changed the entire text of both of those after writing Dogs Don't Cry.
Oh, wow. So that must have been quite an undertaking.
Well, I'm looking at my writing adventure as being a learning process and experimenting with different points of view and, just getting into the technicalities of writing a novel. Yeah, it's fun. I don't mind changing all that, even though it takes months to get it done.
So the inspiration to write about Belleau Wood has its roots in what you envisioned as a specific audience for your work, prompted by your own son's service in the U.S. Marines. So have you found that audience? Tell us a little about that, how you started out aiming toward a particular goal here.
When my sons were on deployment, they would take a Kindle load of novels with them to read, because there are always off times when you need to do something, and reading was what both of them did. So I tried to fashion Our Desperate Hour to be a book that young Marines would read on deployment. Has that happened? Not that I'm aware of yet, but I'm working on that. An American Nurse in Paris is really aimed at more of a female audience, not as much the Marine guy type audience, the deployed Marine guy or woman audience. And Dogs Don't Cry is aimed at a young adult novel audience. But in the Marine audience, what I've done so far is make connections within the Marine Corps to try to promote the book to Marines. It recently received the James Webb Award, which is an award for novel-length fiction put out or organized by the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. That was a major feather in the hat of the novel, and a major award from a Marine standpoint. I'm hoping that will perhaps be something I can use to promote the book with Marines. So far, it hasn't happened yet.
Well, I always like to hear about authors' creative processes because they can be so different and very fascinating. But you have a background that was neither military nor literary. So tell us a little about your earlier career, how you prepared to launch into fiction writing, and what sort of challenges that presented.
I'd always liked writing, even going back to high school. And when I went to medical school, I quit fiction writing. I'd done just short stories, had written some plays for fun in high school, and was on the high school literary magazine, which is a fairly meaningless thing, except it did involve critiquing other people's work. I went to med school and worked as a physician, practiced pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine in Green Bay, Wisconsin from 1985 to 2016. Later in that career, I went part-time, and that gave me some free time to start doing ancestry research. As I did that, I began writing up small biographies of various ancestors of mine. The process of doing that proved to me that I had forgotten how to write, pretty much, except for medical stuff. Doctors aren't great writers at baseline. So I dug into writing technique, grammar, and all of that, really trying to learn more about the writing process. During the ancestry research, I ran into a wacky story about my grandfather's first cousin back in the 1930s that I wrote up as a history first and then as a short story, and there were a lot of gaps in it, and eventually it turned into one novel, and then that turned into two, and then three, and that's where some of the characters in the novel The Great War come from. I kept trying to come up with the origin story for all these characters and realized that they all began in Bella Wood, basically. So it started with ancestry research, a crazy story that I'm not going to waste your time telling you about, and then that ultimately combined with the Marine Corps research into this series.
So looking ahead, do you anticipate sticking with military history or maybe branching out into other areas?
I have 3 more novels in this series to go, and they're all in various parts of the process. Dogs Don't Cry will be followed by a book called A Dog's Gift that takes the same characters as Dogs Don't Cry up to Christmas Day of 1918. An American Nurse in Paris and Our Desperate Hour will combine back again into a joint story that will take Alice Simmons and a Marine named Ben Grant to the end of the war and to Christmas Day of 1918 as well. They're not really Christmas books per se, but they do involve ending on Christmas Day. After those two, there's another book that I've previously written called Hiram's Run that is sort of the point where the original series joins with this one. After that, I move up to the 1930s into a series that probably will be renamed several times before I'm done. Beware or Mob Doctors could be a couple of the titles for the series that take place in 1930s Chicago. After I'm done with that, I plan to do something else different, and I don't know what that's going to be.
Well, we've been talking with John Andrews, author of An American Nurse in Paris. Be sure to check out the excerpt starting this Sunday at coloradosun.com, and you can also learn more about John and the author Q&A. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate it.
And thank you, listeners, for making the Daily Sun-Up part of your day. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for listening, and finally, here are a few stories that you should know about today.
A new poll finds that Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser has surged ahead of U.S. Senator Michael Bennet in the Democratic primary for governor. The public policy polling poll of likely Democratic primary voters found 45% supported Weiser, 36% supported Bennet, and 19% were still undecided. Voting ends on June 30th. Communities in Jefferson County are recovering after a slow-moving storm dumped nearly 6 inches of rain over the Evergreen for roughly 2 hours. According to the sheriff's office, the deluge washed out bridges, left muddy debris strewn across roads, and caused major flooding to homes along Bear Creek. After a couple of contentious years around a popular gravel bike event in Steamboat Springs, race organizers and locals are getting along again. The race's unexpected draw caught folks in northern Colorado off guard, but all is well as nearly 3,000 riders will descend on the area this weekend.
To read these stories and much more, visit our website, coloradosun.com. As an award-winning nonprofit news outlet, we take our mission of credible, independent journalism seriously, and you can check out our trust indicators at coloradosun.com/ethics. Our music is by the Denver-based Matt Skellinger Group. A link to their music is in our show notes, and a special thanks to Swallow Hill Music. I'm David Krause. See you next time.